On the Korean Peninsula, an oppressive regime rules of people living in fear and starvation. Throughout the 1990s, the United States relied on a negotiated framework to keep North Korea from gaining nuclear weapons. We now know that that regime was deceiving the world and developing those weapons all along. And today, the North Korean regime is using its nuclear program to incite fear and seek concessions. America and the world will not be blackmailed.
The president these men serve has declared he loathes Kim Jong-il, the North Korean dictator now engaged in a perilous game of nuclear brinksmanship. A mere 12 kilometers away from North Korea's border, the US Army prepares for an attack it says its enemy could mount in a matter of hours.
Today we got mud, we're breaking ice, snow, and below freezing temperatures, but we train in all the type of conditions so we can be ready to fight tonight whenever that night comes.
The battle theatre on the Korean Peninsula is a far cry from the burning sands of Iraq. America's foe here is a very different one as well. Unlike Saddam Hussein's depleted forces, the North Korean army is well disciplined, it has more than 1 million men, and it's said it's prepared to fight until the bitter end. The North Koreans also have access to one of the world's largest arsenals of chemical weapons and perhaps 1 or 2 nuclear bombs. The fact of the matter is, when it comes to weapons of mass destruction, North Korea makes Saddam Hussein look like a relative lightweight. Living directly in the crosshairs of North Korea's sights are its former compatriots in the south. The 10 million people of South Korea's capital Seoul go about their daily business knowing that thousands of missiles, many of them loaded with chemicals, could rain down upon them at any time.
They have tens of thousands of artillery tubes, heavy caliber artillery tubes aimed at Seoul. They have roughly about 700,000 very well-trained, very heavily armed soldiers along the DMZ. It's only 155 miles from west to east, and 700,000 soldiers along this narrow space is a lot of concentration of North Korean military capability.
But despite the lethal barrage that might be unleashed upon it, South Korea now finds itself at loggerheads with its ally, the United States, over how the threat from the north should be dealt with. President Kim Dae-jung and the man who will succeed him in the coming weeks, Roh Moo-hyun, are enthusiastic backers of the so-called sunshine policy of engagement with the North Korean regime. But the logic of the hardliners in the Bush administration would suggest that Kim Jong-il is next in line after Saddam Hussein is forcibly removed from power.
What President Bush could do to help improve the situation is saying that he is willing to have an open mind and an open view of the situation. But I would say it would be difficult from what he has been continuously saying to back down like that. It's going to be very difficult, in my opinion.
South Korea's politicians have been responding as well to the growing tide of anti-American sentiment out on the streets. Candlelight vigils are still being held for 2 Korean children killed last year in a road accident involving US servicemen. This incident and a series of other perceived slights have inflamed public opinion. Among the young in particular, the role of the United States on the peninsula is now being challenged.
저희는 뭐 전쟁 세대도 아니고요. 배고픈 세대가 아니라고 흔히 말씀들을 하십니다. 그렇기 때문에 저희는 그런 아픔 같은 것을 알지 못하기 때문에인지 몰라도 저희는 잘못된 것은 바로 잡아야 된다고 또 생각을 하고요. 그런 그런 것을 아픔을 겪지 못해서인지는 몰라도 미국이 잘못된 것을 그냥 두고 보는 성격들은 못 됩니다. 저희 지금 세대가 잘못된 것은 바로 잡아야 되고 그것이 어떤 나라이든 간에 국가와 국가 간은 대등하다고 생각을 합니다.
분노를 모아서 전 세계의 양심인들이
But even among those South Koreans who have known the deprivation and horror wrought by the North's aggression, there is a yearning for the long Cold War on the peninsula to follow in the footsteps of Europe and finally thaw. Nowhere is this more tragically apparent than among those families who have suffered the unspeakable cruelty of being separated by the conflict. Under the Sunshine Policy, heavily restricted reunions like this one have been allowed where brothers and sisters, children and parents are given a few fleeting hours with each other.
He went to Seoul.
Ha Sang-nam is now waiting for her turn. She hasn't seen her brother, Sang-ik, for more than 50 years, ever since he was stolen away to the north by soldiers when just a schoolboy. Only recently did she discover that her brother was still alive.
다만 살았다는 거 너무 기쁘더라고요. 기쁜데 왜 그렇게 눈물이 나오는지 모르겠더라고요. 지금도 또 이렇게 얘기를 하니까 또는 그래가지고 여기서는 이 동생하고 나하고 이렇게 외롭게 살고 있어요. 어머니도 돌아가시고 그래요. 어머니가 한이 맺혀 돌아가셨거든. 상이기만 보고 죽겠다고 그랬는데 결국은 돌아가셨어요.
Despite North Korea's saber-rattling these past weeks, Ha Sang-nam believes her government's policy of dialogue is still the best way to prevent war.
그거에 대해서는 단지 앞으로 전쟁이 없으면 좋겠어. 전쟁이 있기 때문에 이렇게 서로가 떨어지고 죽고 살고 하거든요. 정말 전쟁이 없으면 좋겠어요.
But among those with intimate knowledge of the regime in the north, like defector Kim Song-min, there is a strong view that many in the south are deluding themselves. Mr. Kim was a captain in the North Korean army before he escaped into China. Kim Jong-il, he says, must be overthrown.
김정일 정권을 옮는다는 게요. 그건 100% 일단 맞고요. 그게 옮는다는 게 어떤 의미가 되는가 하면 저희 같은 경우에는 북한 주민들을 살리는 거예요. 독재자 한 사람이 북한 주민을 그렇게 굶어 죽이고 지금 못 살게 넣는데 김정일 하나 죽인다는 건 의미가 커요. 북한 주민 전체 주민들을 살린다는 거예요. 그래서 꼭 그렇게 해야 돼요.
The crisis on the Korean peninsula has made for some strange bedfellows. German doctor and tireless activist Norbert Wollertson finds himself backing George W. Bush and urging a tough line against Kim Jong-il. Here at the Chinese embassy in Seoul, he has been trying, so far unsuccessfully, to petition China to release more than 1,000 North Korean refugees it is now detaining. For 1.5 years, Norbert witnessed firsthand the excesses of the so-called Hermit Kingdom before he was expelled.
There's genocide going on in North Korea. These are crimes against humanity, and we have to do something. It's not only a discussion about nuclear threats, not only a discussion about war, it's mainly a discussion about concentration camps, human rights, about violation of human rights, and therefore, as an emergency doctor, I have to act as in an emergency case.
Despite being one of the world's great weapons proliferators, for the time being it is Iraq, not North Korea, which the world is treating as the emergency. Meanwhile, here on the Korean peninsula, nerves are on edge as people wait to see how this dangerous game will play out. For the newly elected government in Seoul, the challenge is an unenviable one. How to balance the competing demands of an impatient US ally, an increasingly anti-American electorate, and a neighbour threatening to turn South Korea into ash.